Have you ever wondered why there are so many beast characters in Elden Ring? Maliketh, Serosh, and Blaidd are a few major examples, and various forms of beastmen can be found as enemies throughout the game. There's a reason for this, and if we examine the origin of these beastmen a bit closer, we can learn a lot about both Farum Azula and the origin story of the lands between. Before starting, let me first say that this video is highly speculative and structured a bit differently from my other videos. That being said, I still think that there can be much to learn here, and as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and findings in the comments. Of course, this video assumes you have basic knowledge of the game, and there will be spoilers if you're concerned about that. First, let's cover what the beasts are. After kindling the giant's flame to burn the Erd Tree, the player is transported to crumbling Farum Azula. The ancient dragons and the beastmen are the most notable enemies of this area. These Azula beastmen were chosen by an unnamed figure to guard a giant mausoleum enshrining an ancient dragon, which probably refers to Farum Azula and the hidden boss Dragon Lord Placidusax. Looking at Farum Azula's architecture, we see that it's partially built from the graves and bodies of these beasts. With all of this in mind, let's make our first assumptions, being that the beastmen originate from Farum Azula, and that they were chosen by whatever god ruled over it. Placidusax's remembrance states that he is awaiting the return of his god, so that could be related to the deity that chose the beastmen as guardians. With reasonably supported assumptions like this, we'll form conclusions to help construct our main theory. Now let's look at Maliketh, the Black Blade. He acts as the main boss of Farum Azula, and he is revealed as the true identity of the beast clergyman Geraint. We can look at Geraint's location, items, and voice lines to help clarify Maliketh's origins. Geraint's weapon is based on a real Italian sidearm that I think is pronounced like Cinquedea?
Sorry, I don't speak Italian.
It's described as the sword given to the high-ranking clergymen of Farum Azula, and Geraint's bestial sanctum is also built from Farum Azula's same beast graves. The ending of Geraint's quest even shows him implying that the lands between are not his original home.
But I have done all I can in this land.
Geraint's weapon additionally states that the beast's 5 fingers were symbolic of the intelligence once granted upon their kind. The spells that Geraint can give us specify that after gaining intelligence, civilization took hold, and that stones were the first weapons of the beasts. The final thing to note about Maliketh is that his remembrance describes him as Queen Marika's shadow, and he is referred to as a shadow-bound beast. This all supports our next assumption that Maliketh is a shadow-bound beast from Farum Azula. Next up is Blaidd, the loyal half-wolf companion to Ranni the Witch. Another one of Ranni's companions, known as Iji, sums up Blaidd's origins pretty well for us.
The 2 fingers gave Blaidd to Lady Ranni as a faithful follower. Her very shadow, incapable of treachery.
The 2 fingers that Iji referred to are the interpreters of the godlike greater will, and they inflict Blaidd with madness after Ranni defies their plans. This alone gives us 2 more assumptions. The first is that Iji's terminology indicates that Blaidd is also a shadowbound beast. The second is that the 2 fingers have some level of control over the shadowbound beasts. Finally, we are brought to the beast regent Serosh. Godfrey was the first Elden Lord and consort to Queen Marika and her Golden Order. After becoming a lord, Godfrey took Serosh upon his back to suppress his lust for battle. Serosh is also described as an aged counselor who guides Godfrey and Marika's golden lineage. What's interesting about Serosh is that one of the rewards for Geraint's questline is the Beast Claw Great Hammer, which reads, Great Hammer with a striking end modeled to resemble 5 beastly claws. The black nails protruding from golden fur are said to represent Serosh, Lord of Beasts, who went to become King Godfrey's regent. The emphasis of Serosh having 5 claws is similar to Geraint's weapon describing the 5 fingers of the beasts, and since we also received this item from Geraint, it's pretty safe to assume that Serosh is also related to Maliketh and the beasts of Farum Azula. Since Serosh and Maliketh seem to have a similar origin to the beasts of Farum Azula, and Blaidd's similarities to Maliketh also connect him to the beasts, we can make our first major conclusion. Since all of the Golden Order's beasts that we know of are connected to each other, and the majority of them are tied to the beastmen of Farum Azula, let's conclude that the beasts connect the Golden Order and the Greater Will to Farum Azula. Maliketh's boss arena also presents some key information. A more complex version of the Elden Ring is displayed above a statue that depicts a woman sitting with 3 wolves. However, the Elden Beast is described as the being sent by the Greater Will to the lands between that would later become the Elden Ring. If this is another variation of the same Elden Ring, then that could imply that the Greater Will is connected to the god of Farum Azula. This helps explain the intelligence and lineage of the beasts and dragons. The beasts seem to have shifted their goals from protecting Farum Azula to serving the Golden Order, and the lightning wielded by the ancient dragons is described to be imbued with a similar goal to the Erd Tree. Though, this conclusion presents some new questions. Why would the Greater Will abandon Placidusax and the beasts? Why does the Elden Ring that's within the Erd Tree have such a simplified design compared to the Elden Ring of Farum Azula? The answer may lie with how the player can first reach Farum Azula. To kindle the giant's flame, we can either sacrifice Melina, who is playing the role of a finger maiden, or we can utilize the power of the frenzied flame, which is represented by the 3 fingers. Without the power of the 2 fingers, the player can only reach Farum Azula with the help of the 3 fingers. Additionally, there's another NPC in the game named Hyetta that acts as a maiden of the 3 fingers. She states that all that there is came from the One Great before births and souls came to be. The One Great may seem like another name for the Greater Will, but she makes a distinction between these names to describe how the Greater Will made a mistake by introducing fractures and suffering to the world. Hyetta wishes to end the world's suffering with the help of the Frenzied Flame.
Melt it all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again.
Notice that the word one was capitalized here. Our next assumptions are now that the One Great existed before the Greater Will's mistake, the Frenzied Flame seeks to return to the One Great, and the powers of both the 2 and 3 fingers are able to kindle the giant's flame. Our second major conclusion from this is that the Greater Will and the Frenzied Flame are connected to each other and Farum Azula. Keeping all of our assumptions and conclusions in mind, we can construct our theory to be as follows. The Greater Will and the Frenzied Flame both ruled over Farum Azula as the One Great. Now, I know this may not be convincing enough yet, but let's cover what all this can answer. First, it explains why the ambassadors of the Greater Will and the Frenzied Flame are represented by sets of 2 and 3 fingers. Combine them, and you can make up a full hand, symbolizing how the One Great uses this to reach into the world of the lands between. There's a ton of other symbolism that also supports this theory if we look for it. The 5-fingered hands of the beasts are what represent their intelligence, with Maliketh, Serosh, and most of the Farum Azula beastmen all having 5 fingers. However, the separation of the Greater Will and the Frenzied Flame has since allowed some beasts to drift away from these traits. The more traditional beastmen have 5 fingers, wield weapons, and wear armor that covers their eyes and ears so that they can blindly follow the path set in stone. Maliketh and the more powerful beastmen wear very similar armor, and Serosh wears the same type of armor, but instead of covering his eyes, he just keeps them closed. However, since the One Great has been split apart, the beastmen have strayed away from these features. Blaidd has the intelligence and the 5 fingers of the beastmen, but his armor is unique and his eyes are uncovered and open. Some of the beastmen in Farum Azula reflect these changes as well. Many beastmen are unarmored and engage in cannibalism, and we can even find 4-legged versions of these beasts that are missing the beast's signature 5 fingers and usage of weapons. The dragons showcase this trend as well. All of the ancient dragons have 5 fingers on each hand, with Placidusax's hands having a similar appearance to Gerank's weapon that explains the significance of this number of fingers. The new Age of Dragons were born after the fall of Farum Azula, and their 5-fingered hands have been replaced by a single claw on each wing. Placidusax also has 2 heads that face upward while he awaits the return of his god, which resembles how the 2 fingers commune with the Greater Will. If we count the number of stumps that show Placidusax's severed heads, we can guess that he once had 5 heads, so Placidusax's missing heads can symbolize how the 2 fingers are what remain after the splitting of the One Great's 5 fingers. Even the Elden Beast, the living form of the Elden Ring, reflects this idea. The only piece of human anatomy that it features is a pair of hands with 5 fingers each. The One Great could even be responsible for the creation of the Numen. The statue in Maliketh's boss arena shows a woman alongside 3 beasts and could represent how both the beasts and the Numen, who are said to have come from outside the lands between, have ties to Farum Azula. Maliketh is also described as Queen Marika's half-brother, so Marika the Numen and Maliketh the Beast could have both been somehow spawned from the One Great. It's possible that the splitting of the One Great is the source of almost every conflict in the lands between. The Numen's eternal cities go on to oppose the Greater Will and attempt to sever its influence, and the Frenzied Flame wishes to return to when births, souls, and suffering did not exist and all was one. These conflicts all correspond to the major endings of the game, with the Eternal Cities awaiting their Lord of Night, the 3 Fingers awaiting their Lord of Chaos, and the two fingers seeking to repair the Elden Ring. Building off of this theory, we can make other assumptions about the age of the One Great using other in-game information. We know that before the Erd Tree, all life was blended together in what was known as the Crucible. It seems fitting that the Frenzied Flame's ambitions are to melt everything away to become one again, as the age of the One Great may have been marked by the Crucible's oneness. This last suggestion is a bit of a stretch, but Ghostflame may have also played a part in this age. A small number of beastmen fight with the sorcery of Ancient Death Rancor, which originates from Deathbirds. These Deathbirds burn death in Ghostflame before the age of the Erd Tree, and are descendants of the Twinbird, the envoy of an unnamed outer god. Though, we have to keep in mind that this spell is also loosely connected to the undead. Looking at the decaying bodies of the beastmen, it's possible that this spell was just a side effect of the undead curse. Finally, let's touch on how this theory fits into the main themes of Elden Ring. While we may want to say that every outer god, including the Formless Mother and the God of Rot, were once a part of the One Great, the specific inclusion of only the Greater Will and the Frenzied Flame would reflect a certain trend of Elden Ring's characters. Queen Marika and Lord Radagon share one body but have opposing goals. The Omen twins show one to be proud of his birth, while the other is ashamed of it. Several other characters also assume multiple identities that in some way directly contrast from each other. There's this repeating theme of duality throughout all of Elden Ring. Maybe this all points back to the origins of the world that the player finds themselves in. The One Great acts as the origin for much of this world's life, but they eventually split to become the opposing Greater Will and the Frenzied Flame. While the Greater Will introduces fractures and separations to the lands between, the Frenzied Flame plans to use chaos to return everything to its unified nature. All life will become one, just as it once was long ago. Of course, it's up to you to interpret this theory how you may see fit. Maybe my conclusions were a bit too much of a stretch, or maybe all of it makes perfect sense to you. How each person interprets this game's story can vary greatly, and that's part of the fun and the intentional design of games like this. On a closing note, if you enjoyed this video, then I would greatly appreciate it if you shared it or subscribed to the channel. I make these videos alone, and I'm still new to content creation, but the response so far has been beyond what I ever expected, and I hope to continue to improve the quality of these videos using your feedback. I have big plans ahead for more Elden Ring content along with other games, and your support through liking or subscribing helps immensely for me to follow through with them. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.